this is what we're working on, treat time. And my friend Bev, who owns Palette and Sawdust, showed me a box full of these surfaces, and she said, help. And so I thought, well, I'll try to do something on it, and this is what I came up with. And I completely sold out of the surfaces twice, but I will have some more at Painting Palooza if you're interested. Anyway, so I hope you had fun doing your background with the stenciling, and if you were able to do some stamping on the background. I don't know if you can see mine, but I just like to add little hints of things to brighten up the background and make it a little bit more interesting to look at. So the first thing we are going to do is you're going to need dioxazine purple. And what we're going to do is we're going to float shading on this background all the way around this design area. So nice, soft, well blended out float. And if you haven't heard my little spiel about well blended out floats, let me show you what I'm talking about. So here's my palette. And so when I want to soften a float quite a bit, because this could go, dioxazine purple could go on pretty harsh. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to load my brush the way I normally do for a float, corner load, and I'm going to blend. Now normally you blend right in the same line, but when you want to soften that float and make it a little bit more transparent, what you want to do is you want to walk away from that line and leave a little bit more paint on your palette. Now I can always come back in here and pick up more paint if I run out, but you just want to walk away from that main line so that you're not just blending the same amount of paint into your brush. And so I'm going to go on my piece and I am going to float this, hopefully, okay, on the, around the design itself. I'm just going to float this very well blended out dioxazine purple all the way around this line. I think I've had too much caffeine today. I'm kind of shaky. Or maybe you just are making me nervous. I don't know. So just around everything, worms, bugs, cupcakes, pumpkins, everything's going to get shaded around. Doesn't have to be perfect. I was just noticing I was editing the video for last month's piece, and I realized that I told y'all I used to be really picky, but I'm not that picky anymore. And it's so nice when you're not too terrible picky about things. I mean, to a point you need to be picky. But on this, if you just want to get some of that dark purple around the design elements so that they pop off the background just a little bit more. Anyway, I hope y'all have been having a good week. Can you believe Halloween is almost here? October has gone so fast. It's hard to believe. It really doesn't take too long to float this shading around your piece. We don't have to do it around the outside edge because the outside edge is going to have that rim around it, and that's going to create its own little shadow. So you don't need to worry about the outside edge. I taught a class yesterday for artful webinars, and that was a great time. Another Halloween piece. I've got to paint something else because I think I'm going to forget how to paint Christmas. All right, so I'm going to go around the bug on this one. So I'm going to fill in those little I'm shading those little negative spaces around my worms, my candy worms. All right. So background shading, check. That's done. So we're going to move down to our pumpkin, and I'm going to get a little closer into him or her. I don't know. Could be a her. And we are going to dry brush some highlighting on our pumpkin. So you want to get out your favorite brush to dry brush with. I like to use a Langnickel short round sable brush that I get from Royal. And if you want to see a video about how I like to dry brush, I do have one on my website and on the YouTube channel. But we are going to dry brush some highlighting with golden straw. So no water in your brush, otherwise it wouldn't be a dry brush anymore. But we want to dry brush golden straw down each one of these sections on the pumpkin, just to give it a highlight through the center there. And when I get to the big center of the pumpkin, I'm going to widen that dry brush out because that section is wider. So a nice highlight in there. And I'm going to go on these side sections. And then you want to wash out your dry brush, but you want to dry it out because we are going to use it again pretty quickly. That's what I like about these short round sables is I can dry it out on my towel enough to use it again relatively quickly. And now we are going to float some highlighting with golden straw on each section. I'm going to start at the outside edge and just float golden straw. Now this is going to go on pretty bright, but as it dries, it tones down. So don't panic, okay? Blend it out a little bit more. And then I'm going to come along the outside edge of the next section. It's going to be one of those Sundays, isn't it? And then I'm going to do the sides of the middle section. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to flip my piece over, and I'm going to do the outside section, and then the next section, and then that center section with a float of golden straw. Now we need to let those floats dry because I realize you may not be painted too. So what I want to do is I'm going to go down to this cupcake paper, and I'm going to float highlighting on the cupcake paper. And it's kind of going to be like we did the pumpkin. We are going to float highlighting on the outside edge. Let me get up here where you can see the cupcake paper. I can't say cupcake paper. My goodness. I'm going to go the outside edge with golden straw. And then I'm just going to go the outside edge of each section. That way we can let our floats on our pumpkin dry. And when you get to the center section, it's actually going to get a highlight on both sides. So do one side this way, and they come up to these little scallops. That's where they end. And then I'm going to flip my cupcake paper over. Wow, that's really hard to say. I had no idea. And I'm going to float this outside edge and any little bits that are down here by the worms. Up here. We have my neighbor's dog babysitting for a little while, and she's sniffing under the door to my room. It sounds pretty funny, actually. So there we've got that cupcake paper highlighted. Okay, we're going to go back to our pumpkin. Turn my paper back over. And we are going to float some shading on our pumpkin. Now, this is just the first shading, and it's going to be done with country red. I always like to float some red onto my pumpkins first, and then we'll come back and we'll shade it again with burnt umber. But this float is done with country red, and we are going to float on the sections of the pumpkin next to where we highlighted, so it kind of backs up to that highlight we did. So this time I'm going to start towards the center so I don't wash my float out. So I'm going to float country red, and then I'm going to float country red on the very skinny one. And yes, it kind of wipes out that golden straw a little bit, but not completely. And let's turn it over and float on the middle section, on the section next to the middle. And then we're going to float the other section. We also want to float this color along the bottom where the pumpkin is stuck into the frosting. So I'm going to float. I'm still going to treat each one of these sections like it was its own little piece of pumpkin. So I don't just do one big long float. I go into each section and I do what is kind of sort of a C-stroke float, meaning I start up on the side a little bit and come down so that I'm filling in this little V area here and widening it out. So here we go, and I'm going to come back up the other side. And then I'm going to float the final two little sections. And the same way that I did the bottom, I'm going to do that to the top of the pumpkin. So each little section is going to get a float of country red. Including the big old center one. Myself. So I want to let those floats dry. We will go back down to our cupcake paper. Hey, I said it right that time. We need to float a highlight across the top of the scalloped edge. So I'm going to turn this guy sideways, back up a little bit, and that's going to be a highlight float of golden straw. And it's just going to go all along that scalloped edge. Just to pop that cupcake paper on top of that frosting. that's really brightened up that cupcake paper. I think we can go back to our pumpkin, and you'll need some burnt umber. And everywhere that you floated country red, you're going to come back and float it again with some very well blended out burnt umber. So I actually like the color that country red and burnt umber make when you put them together. Reminds me of candy, milk chocolate or something. I'm not going to be home for Halloween. So darn, I don't get to buy a bunch of candy that's going to tempt me to eat it. And if you like to mop out your floats, it might be a good place to do it, just to soften them a little bit. And again, top and bottom are going to get the burnt umber float also. What that does is just kind of makes the pumpkin look a little more rounded, like it's got a little bit more dimension, as opposed to just a flat painted pumpkin. Right, time to do the bottom. Now the stem is really easy. You're just going to take a liner brush or a small round brush and golden straw. Let me get the original here so you can see it. And all I did is I took the liner brush and I lined some highlighting on the stem with golden straw, and I did it so it kind of looks like it has ridges. Might be easier to do it up sideways or upside down, but I'm just going to come in here and line some highlighting on that stem. If it blends together at the top, that's okay. So there's an easy way to get your stem to look ridgy. Let's go back down to our cupcake paper. Let me back off a little bit. And we're going to float shading on our cupcake paper with Hauser Dark Green. So it's going to be much like the pumpkin. The shading is going to butt up against the highlight that we did. And then there are a couple other places. But let's float here. So I'm just going right up against those highlights I did. I should have started in the middle. So I didn't wipe out my floats. I want to go down here too. Remember to start in the middle down there. And I'm going to turn my cupcake paper over and do the other sides. All right. So the paper's starting to look like it has a little dimension. Let's float some shading at the base of our pumpkin stem with the burnt umber. So just all across the base of the stem. You want to add a little float of burnt umber. You want to get out some lamp black, and you're going to paint in his little face. And if you want to change the way the face looks, that's fine. I don't mind. I'm just going to give him his little facial features. Eyes, nose, and mouth. Shouldn't take too long to get those painted on there. So we're going to go back to our paper and finish up the shading. And that's still done with Hauser Dark Green. What we're going to do is we're going to shade above and below the band, the orange band and the spider, and then across the bottom. So I would probably do the bottom first. And across the bottom means up and around the worms. And then I'll go above the band. And around the spider's head. And then we'll come back and we'll do underneath after our floats on the bottom dry. We're going to work a little bit on the frosting. And we are going to dry brush some highlighting on that frosting with purple cow. So get out a little purple cow and your dry brush. And let's dry brush some highlighting. And dry brush like we did on our pumpkin, each section. So I'm going to treat each of these little fluffs and curls and stuff as their own little section. So I'm going to dry brush some highlighting in each of those little sections. And this one goes across and over in front of the pumpkin. So I want to go across and over in front of the pumpkin. I'm going to dry brush in here. And each of those little scalloped areas is going to get a little bit of a dry brush. And don't wash your brush out when you get done. I want you to get out some warm white. We haven't used it yet, surprisingly. But I want you to get out warm white and just pick up a little warm white on my dirty brush. So I have a lighter value of purple cow. Rather than pull another bottle of paint in, we'll just lighten up what we have. And I want to just dry brush a little bit brighter highlighting on each of those sections. This one I'm not going to go through the center. I'm just going to keep it on those outside edges a little bit. And that got a little bit bright, but that'll be okay. It's frosting. It's okay. Okay, let's go back. Bounce back to our pumpkin again. And on his face, let me show you this one. We are going to line that golden straw in the left side of each of the facial features. And you just do that with a liner brush. So a liner brush and golden straw. Just gonna, I call it the cut edge. So I'm just gonna line the cut edge. And if it's kind of dry brushed, that's okay. I didn't add water to my brush. I just picked up paint. So I'm doing the left side and the bottom edge. Right. We're going to put a little bit of a warm white highlight. It's very tiny in the top of each of the features. So just a quick little warm white highlight in the top. In the eyes, we still have to put some color. On the mouth, I'm going to come from this side and go across. He has some little cheeks. Of course, pumpkins have cheeks, right? And those are going to be dry brushed on with Country Red. And pick up a little bit of warm white just to make it pink, more pink than red. So little dry brush cheeks with Country Red plus a touch of warm white to make it more pink. And you just want to give him nice round cheeks right here at the top outer side of his smile. If you can't see it enough, you may want to pick up a little bit more warm white and lighten it up a little bit. You want to get out a touch of desert turquoise. And we're going to do that little C-stroke float in each eye to give him some color in his eyes. Corner load some desert turquoise and give him a little bit of color. This is tiny, tiny eyes, so tiny C-stroke float. Makes him look a little happy. He has a couple little pupils in his eyes that are lamp black, and I just did lamp black set downs, little ovals. That kind of sit, if you had painted an eye and painted the iris, you want to put it right up in the center. If that C-stroke was a complete circle, you would be putting this set down right in the center. We need to let those dry, but we do come back and add a little warm white highlight to those pupils, but I want them to dry first. So we'll go back down to our cupcake paper and do that float of Hauser dark green underneath the band. So I'm just going to float Hauser dark green under the band and around the spider's bum. And we might as well go to the frosting and float some shading with our dioxazine purple. And if you have your picture handy, that would help. I'm going to float across this bottom edge in those scallops to start with. My handle is getting in the way there, my watch handle. Let's see, back up a little bit. So I'm going to start here and add a little float in the bottom of each of those scallops with Diox purple. Treat each scallop as its own little section too. That way you get the color kind of going up the side of the scallop a little bit and it rounds it out a little bit more. Walk the color up the sides too when you come to the outside edges. And then I'm going to come to this next step, this next layer up here. I'm going to do the same thing. C strokes. This one I'm going to make it go a little long and kind of tail off. So it's like just a big blob, long blob of frosting. My favorite kind of frosting. And then I'm going to turn my guy around so I can do this other side a little easier. I'm going to come here. And again, I'm going to make a kind of long tail on this one. So there are little sprinkles that are on the cupcake. And all I did was I used my liner brush again, and I did little set downs of colors that were on my palette. A couple of colors we don't have on our palette right now, but we are going to put them on so we can use them for sprinkles, are burnt orange, and I believe I want to use Irish moss too. So you just get to set down little sprinkles. Let me show you here. Just little sprinkles on your, and ooh, look at that. I forgot to put a highlight on that little guy. There we go. Fixed him. Of all the different colors on your palette, the red, the green, the blue, the purple. And don't make them line up like little soldiers. Make them go different ways. Make them big enough so that they can get a highlight on them. And I probably would start out with like 3 of each color to begin with, just to spread them out a little bit. And let's see. Let's put some orange on there. An orange here, orange here. And then if you need to add more, you always can. I think I want to add purple cow. Might not show up very much. That's not a very good set down. Oh, yellow. I need yellow. Do yellow here, here, and here. Some red sprinkles. If you want to put more than 3 of a color, that's fine too. And I'm also going to put some white ones. Up here. Let's see, 1 there. I think that's enough. A little water, so there. All right, so when those are dry, we'll come back and we'll add a little highlight dot to those. Probably do that the same time we do it to his eyes. Let's go to the band here and dry brush some highlighting on it with a golden straw. And while we're doing that, we'll dry brush a little highlighting on our bug too. So let me back up. So dry brush, drying mine out. Picking up a little golden straw, and let's just dry brush a little highlight on the orange band. And then a little highlight, and it doesn't matter if you get off into his body on the bug, because we're going to paint those wings in anyway. And we're going to float some shading on the band, and it's going to go next to the spider and on the outside edges, and that's done with floats of country red. So outside edge and next to the spider. And I'll just flip him over. and do the other outside edge. Try not to get your fingers into your sprinkles, although they should be setting up right now. If you didn't dot them with a stylus, they will dry a whole lot faster. There's a stripe that goes along the top and bottom of that orange band. I don't know if you can see that. Let me see if I can get it. There's just a thin little stripe that goes there that is desert turquoise. So a liner brush and some thin desert turquoise, and let's just add a little decorative stripe to the top and bottom of that orange band. Let's go back and add that little highlight to the eyes and the sprinkles. And that's just with your liner brush and warm white. So I'm going to go back to the pupils of the pumpkin's eyes and just add a little highlight dot, ever so tiny dot. And then on each of the sprinkles, I want to add a little highlight dot. And it really doesn't matter which side you put it on, or top or bottom, right or left. Just get a little dot in each one, just to make those stand out a little bit more. Quick and easy little highlight dots. Of course, the white ones, it wouldn't show. Let's go to our spider, and we can line his legs with lamp black. He's a spider, so he's going to have 8 legs, okay? And they're just lamp black in your liner brush. And I did them kind of like comma strokes, but you don't have to. They can just be little legs. So there's always a couple of short ones in the front. Excuse me. And then he has some longer ones that are in the middle. Gotta turn him. And I made him kind of curved different ways. I'm gonna turn him again to make it easy on me, because you do know it's all about me. And then he has a couple of shorter ones towards his behind. And then I didn't do a whole lot of detail on him. All I did was take my liner brush and some desert turquoise and stroked a little highlight on his head and on his body. And it's not really a stroke. It's kind of squared off, actually. But I just wanted to highlight his head and his body a little bit, so they would give the idea that it had some shape. Okay, let's go back to our frosting. I think we can do that now. And what we want to do is we want to line a little shadow underneath each of those sprinkles. And I'm sorry I didn't mention this earlier. If you have a lot of sprinkles, you can cuss me under your breath. It's okay. But I'm just going to thin down some Diox purple, because I want those sprinkles to look like they're actually stuck into the frosting. So what I'm going to do is liner brush and some thinned Diox purple. I'm just going to line a shadow underneath each of those little sprinkles. It really doesn't take all that long. But on the bottom edge, just a little line of thin Diox purple to make them look like they're stuck into the frosting and not just laying on top. Little details. We do have one more highlight to do on those, but I want to let those shadows dry. So let's go to let's paint in our bug's wings with golden straw. And if you look at your picture and look at this bug, I left a little line of brown in between his wings and around the edge. So his wings are painted in, but they're kind of sitting on top of his ugly brown body, okay? So I'm going to paint his little yellow wings crunchy. They'd be crunchy if you stepped on them. Wings. One of them you can only see a little part of the back wing. I thought he looked more buggy that way. And then while we're again waiting for things to dry, let's go to our worms, gummy worms, and dry brush a highlight on each of them with desert turquoise plus warm white to make a lighter value. So just lighten up that desert turquoise a little bit. And I understand they're little. If you can scrub a little bit of highlighting on them, that would be great. So just, oh, my brush is wet. Sorry about that. Didn't quite get it dry enough. It's not like I don't have more. I could get out a different brush. But if you're not using a different brush, I figured I shouldn't use a different brush. So I'm just scrubbing a little bit of highlight through the center of those worm bodies. Sounds very appetizing, doesn't it? Bugs and worms. Done with the pumpkin, done with the stem. Let's go ahead, dry out your dry brush really well. And let's get that final highlight done on the cupcake frosting. And that's just warm white. And it's basically just in the tops here and there of some of the little poofs. So I'm going to go here and here. And yes, it's going to go over a sprinkle, but that's okay. I'm going to go up here. It's not everywhere. And maybe just on a couple of these lower little scallops. But you just want to pop up the highlighting just a little bit. So on the cupcake paper itself, I wanted to define these folds a little bit more. So what I did is I took my liner brush and I added some comma strokes, kind of long ones. Show you here. So, and they kind of started above the paper a little bit and came down to the orange stripe. So just some nice little comma strokes. I'm not going to see your piece. I'm not going to grade you or anything, so don't panic. But that just helps to define those ridges a little bit more, and it actually cutes up the paper a little bit, I think. Cutes is a verb now, in case you didn't know that. So just add those to kind of finish off that paper. warm white, and your liner brush. And if you wanted to stencil some kind of design on the paper, you're welcome to do that too. Okay, let's go back to our bug. If you didn't leave that space in between, you could always come back with your liner brush and redefine it. If you need to, you can. Just to make it look more crunchy. So you're going to outline, oh no, you're going to line a highlight on his wings with warm white. And it really is just a warm white line, kind of like what we did in the pumpkin eyes and stuff. You just want to take your liner brush and line warm white across the top of his wings. His eyes and his legs and his antenna are all done with thinned lamp black. So your liner brush and lamp black. He's got a couple little beady eyes. You want to make them big enough that you can put a warm white highlight on them. And they kind of sit in the top of his little face there. And then he has antenna. And they kind of come out like out of his forehead right above his eyes and have a little kink at the end. So up and kink. And they kink the same way, unless you want them to go opposite ways. And then this guy has, I think, 6 legs. You can't see them all. So he's got one that you can see that's from the other side that comes out about the middle of his chin, if bugs had chins. And then the other ones come out from under his wings here a little bit. And you might be able to see just the tip of a couple of his legs underneath there. There is a teeny tiny warm white highlight dot on each eye. So just the tippy tip of your liner brush. Now he's on a stick. He's got a toothpick through him. And so you want to line the stick with burnt umber. And the stick kind of is poked into one of the worms. So I'm going to make it wide enough that I can line a highlight on it. So I want to poke it in the worm and stop when I get to the bug. And then the stick is going to continue and come out the top of the bug in between his wings. Okay? And then you're just going to take your liner brush and line a little highlight on that stick with warm white. Just so it stands out a little bit more. The candy worms, we're going to float some shading along the bottom with True Blue. We haven't used that color yet, so you want to get True Blue out. And you're going to shade along the bottom of each of those worms with a float of True Blue. Obviously, since we got True Blue out, we might as well go ahead and use it. So you need to make sure you know which bug is on the top and which bug is on the bottom. So let's go across the bottom of this one. I know this one's okay to just float all the way along the bottom. And then this guy is behind that front one, so I'm going to float on him to set him behind. And then I'm going to come along the bottom edge of him. But this little short guy is on top of him, so I'm going to go around the little short guy and then finish that float. And then I'm going to go along the bottom of the third guy. So they all have a little bit different design on them. One of them has big orange polka dots. So I'm going to thin down a little bit of burnt orange and just paint some dots on the bottom one. Not too many. Make them a good size. Or if you have a dot stencil, you could use that. And make them big enough you don't have to paint as many. That's the logic I use anyway. And then the worm in the middle, I just gave him some orange stripes, which of course are going to get highlighted. So I just went him, and they're not straight up and down, they're curved and follow the shape of his body. So he gets some orange stripes. And then, let's see, the last guy, I did orange stripes on him, but I did them horizontal stripes. And there are 3 of them. So I just followed his body. And added some stripes horizontally. So there are highlights of golden straw on all of this orange, on the polka dots, on the stripes that you did. So liner brush and golden straw, if you can still get in yours. I had to break mine open. I'm just going to go through and add a little highlight dot on each orange polka dot. And then through the center of each stripe, just a little line of golden straw to highlight the stripe. And then on those long horizontals, I basically just did in a couple places. I didn't do the whole stripe. And then there are worms. I don't know if you've ever stared at a worm. I mean, when I was a kid, we'd go fishing and we'd go get earthworms and stuff. And they always have like little sections. And so what I did is with a liner brush and True Blue, I just added those little, what I call sections. And yes, they go right on top of your details that you added. So just thinned True Blue, just add some vertical lines to make the sections of the worm. On the one that has the orange stripes, all I did was kind of line a vertical one, the True Blue next to the orange stripes. So quick and easy, add some little sections to your worms. Finally, there's just a warm white highlight that you line across the top of each worm. It's just like their final bright highlight. It's just a thin little line and it goes all the way along the top. And if it breaks or skips, that's okay. That's perfectly fine. Now where the stick from the bug is going into the worm, you want to take some True Blue and just line a little like C stroke at the base of the stick so it looks like it's actually stuck into the worm. So just a little touch of True Blue to give that an anchor for that stick. All right, lettering. Woohoo! Lettering. Done with lamp black. And no, I didn't make a stencil. Sorry. But you just want to take your liner brush, flatten it out so it has a square tip instead of a pointy tip. And I like to go through and do my vertical lines first and then come back and do my horizontals. So I'm just going to go through and do vertical lines with thinned lamp black and my liner brush. Lettering does not have to be perfect. And you can all say, thank goodness. Which is a good thing because I screwed that R up. And we'll go back and do our horizontals again. And then I'll do my verticals. Did my verticals and doing my horizontals. Get it right, Sand. And then, as usual, I'm going to line some color in the top of each letter with some desert turquoise. And I'm just using the same brush that I did the lettering with. I'm just going to go through and line a little bit of this desert turquoise in like the top half or 2/3 of each letter, depending on how far down I decide to stroke my brush. Just to add some interest to that lettering too, because you can't have all this going on and just have plain old sad lettering. You need to make it interesting too. So quick and easy, just line some desert turquoise in the top. Then pick up a little warm white and line a little bit brighter line in the top. And that doesn't cover as much as the turquoise blue, so it only goes down about 1/4 of the way. And I'm only going to do one of the pieces, the lettering on one of the pieces right now. And then, as I always do with my lettering, I'm going to line a shadow on the background to the top and left of each letter with some thinned Diox purple. So as you look at your lettering, if there's a top, you want to line next across the top and then to the left of each letter. And that helps to pop that lettering off the background a little bit. So top, left, left, left. And this will, if you do this enough, it becomes like second nature to you. You don't really have to think about it. Almost looks like I should think about it more, as poorly as I'm doing this right now. But if there's a left side or a top, you want to line a shadow on it. Luckily, I didn't put a big old saying on here. It's just 2 little words. So you get off easy. Look at that. We're almost done. So we have the trim on the watch and the watch hands and the little band that goes around the bat. I'm going to set this guy aside and get out one of my sets here. And again, this, I didn't add a lot of detail to this because I didn't want to take away from this design. So I just did kind of a minimum on here. So on all of these, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to dry brush some desert turquoise on all of them. Get in your desert turquoise, and like on the bat, I'm just going to dry brush where I think his middle section would be, and on his head and ears. It doesn't have to be perfect. Too perfect, it'll take away from the rest of it. And I'm going to dry brush desert turquoise on his wings. Here we go. On the clock hand, I'm going to dry brush on the hands and on the center. And don't wash your brush out when you're done. It's just kind of dry brush over it. You don't have to try to keep it in the center or anything, but don't wash your brush out because we will come back and dry brush brighter highlighting by picking up some warm white on our dirty brush. And then the frame, you want to dry brush desert turquoise all the way around this frame. And I'll probably just do part of it because I'm sure you get the idea. Okay, so I did half of it. You also want to come back to your clock piece that has the handle at the top. And we want to dry brush desert turquoise across each section of the stem and on the little, what do you call that? The little twister thing? The winder? And on the little oval handle. So then I'm going to pick up some warm white. See, I made a lighter value of desert turquoise. And I'm going to go back and dry brush brighter highlighting on all of those, way brighter, on all of those sections that I just did highlighting on, including my bat and on his wings and on the clock hands. And of course on the rim, the frame. And I'll finish that later. But just for the purpose of showing you what we're doing. And then you're going to float shading on these areas with lamp black. And so, since they were painted in graphite, lamp black shades nicely on there. They play nice together. So I'm going to shade across the bottom of this stem where it goes into that purple part of my watch. And I'm going to go right above there. I'm going to go on the twisty thing, whatever that is. I didn't look up the anatomy of a watch. And then I'm also going to do that little kind of C-stroke to make it look like it's the top of that twisty thing. Twisty, all these technical terms, I hope you're understanding it. I'm also going to go under, on the stem, under the oval handle. I'm going to go on the outside edges of the oval handle. Just to tone that dry brushed highlighting down a little bit. This would be a good place to get out that mop brush. And then on the bat, I'm going to shade on his wings next to his body. I'll get a little closer on him. So I'm going to go on his wings next to his body. I'm giving him a body. Not a very good one. He's kind of lopsided, so I'll fix him up a little bit. And then we'll let that dry, and we'll work on our watch hands. And there are these little beads that you want to shade next to. So I'm going to go next to the center, and then I'm going to go right above that little first little bead, and I'm going to go above the next little bead. And I'll flip it over and do the other hand. And when these floats are dry, we'll come back and we'll shade on the other side of each of those beads. So I'm going to come back to my bat. His body's bugging me. Okay, that's better. And I'm going to float like the top edge, to form the top edge of his wings, just to give it a little bit more detail. So I drop down just a little bit and float to make it look like he's got a ridge at the top of his wings. And that's as detailed as I get on him, except for his ears. I just noticed I float in his ears too. So I'm just going to add a little float of lamp black inside each ear. And that's as detailed as I get on the bat. I can come back now and finish my watch hands. And go under the fat bead and under the little bead. These are real hard. Okay, so the hands are done. And now I don't know if you can see this in the picture or not, but I floated lamp black on the frame that goes on the watch, but I didn't like float with my color to the outside edge. What I did is I came along the edge here and added like a rim. So I side loaded my brush just like I was going to do a regular float, but then I just put the loaded edge on the piece and kind of added this little rim to it. So this, it takes a little time, but I think it's worth it. And I did that on the inside edge also. So all you have left to do is finish up a little bit of shading on this rim, and then you glue your guy together, sign it. Don't forget to sign it. You have to be proud of what you paint, and you'll be done. So I'm really happy. We did it in 2 hours, and you have a practically finished paint piece. And I hope that you will join me next month when we paint blue juice. I do still have a few of those surfaces left, but the packet with the prep is available on the website at justfinedesigns.com. And this will be for the month of November. We are not going to have a meeting in December just because it is Christmas and it's just busy. And dependent on some things that are taking place in the next month or so, I will let you know whether or not we will have a January meeting. But things are a little up in the air right now. But we will definitely be here in November for Boo Juice. And I thank you so much for joining me once again. And I just pray you have a good rest of your Sunday. Enjoy your family, your dinner, and hopefully I'll see some of you in Oklahoma. So take care, my friends, and we'll talk later.